If you're considering going to seminary, one of the things you're probably thinking through is whether you should attend online or move and go somewhere in person. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to be talking about some of the pros and cons of online seminary versus traditional seminary, and whether online seminary might be right for you.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian. Joining me, just like I say every other time, is Dylan Dodson. And today we're asking the question, should you attend seminary online?
So online seminary is obviously a bigger thing.
Yep.
It's becoming a bigger thing. And so we want to give you some pros and cons to consider if you're in that boat, or maybe you just want some advanced theological education and you're just trying to decide, should I go somewhere online or go somewhere physically?
Right.
My journey was originally I was planning to go physically to a seminary. And then my wife and I, we got married between our junior and senior year. We were going to go after our senior year, go. The church we were a part of, the pastor, we were part of a large college ministry, said he was going to plant a church. And I know it's not this simple, but this is what I thought in my mind at the time. I could read about church planting or I could be a part of it. So we helped plant the church.
Yep. And
I did seminary online. And so here are some pros and cons from that experience for you to consider.
Here we go.
So here are some pros. One pro is that you are flexible on schedule. So of online seminary, again, you're not driving anywhere, you're not going anywhere. Typically, you don't have to do anything at a set time. So You're watching lectures. I mean, you have to finish them by a certain time, but you can watch your lectures at any point. A lot of your assignments can be done at any time. And so it's just very flexible, especially if you're working somewhere, if you're working somewhere and trying to serve at a church and try to do online, maybe you're working at a church or maybe you have kids. It's hard, and online provides a lot of flexibility to it. That's one pro. Another pro is that it saves time. So you're not driving somewhere. You don't have to be a certain place at a certain time, traffic, all these sorts of things. There's just a lot of time saving with it that you don't get, if you're physically there. Another pro is that you're not tied down to a physical geographical location. So for us, we planted the church that we planted in, there was no seminary anyway at the city that we were in.
Nowhere nearby.
And I couldn't have, 30 years ago, I couldn't have done that and been a part of a seminary.
Yeah, true.
And so the pro is that you can go, and especially if you're part of a ministry, or you want to be somewhere, you want to plant a church in a certain town or city, whatever, you can actually be there and at the same time still be theologically trained or still get seminary. So that's obviously a big pro for a lot of people.
Yep.
Another one, I'll give two more, and then we can talk a little bit about the pros, and we'll go to the cons. Is that there's more flexibility in coursework, and what I mean by that, it's kind of what I said, is that a lot of times you kind of know when your stuff is due, but it's not necessarily due at a certain class period. Typically it's at the end of the week. And when it's being online, a lot of the stuff you can get ahead on at your own pace. So I'm someone who likes to get things done. I'm very a self-starter, all that sort of thing. So I often would work ahead on the things that I could. I would watch the lectures because I could watch them whenever I want ahead of time. The assignments that I could submit early, I was always ahead, except for the things that I couldn't be on, which helped for the big papers, the weeks that those were due. That was literally the only thing I had to focus on.
Yeah, you could spend time on them.
Because I did classes, I did all the homework, all the other stuff, because I would just submit it early. There wasn't a restriction on that. And then one other pro is that it's probably easier on family life. So if you have kids, even if you don't, if you're married, just because typically you're working, and especially if you're younger and you're starting out, you might be working and be serving at a church and be trying to do seminary in some capacity. That the flexibility of doing it online makes it easier because there's one less thing that you have to be at a certain place at a certain time. You can do it after the kids go to bed, before they get up in the morning. You don't even have to be at home. If you're traveling somewhere, you could do it. And so those are a lot of the pros from my experience of doing it online.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the pros. I don't think this was really your experience, but really come into play if you go back to seminary later in life. It seems like that's, if you go not necessarily right out of finishing an undergrad, but if you have a family or you may be getting into ministry late in life, sounds like a lot of these pros.
Right. The older you are.
A bigger deal.
Now, the ironic thing in my situation is I literally started seminary 2 days after I graduated. But that's because the biggest thing for me was the geographical location. I wanted the practical experience. The church that we were going to help plant was in a place there was no seminary.
There's no seminary nearby.
And it was really important to me to get that experience. And so, again, that's a huge pro because practical experience really helps the seminary aspect. If you don't have any practical experience or you're not in a church while you're in seminary, you'll kind of think certain things are more important than they are, if that makes sense. You'll kind of think you're running into issues that practical people in the real world never run into. So it gives you a grounding. And so those are some pros. Here are some cons to online seminary. You must be self-disciplined. So if you're not a self-starter wanting to get it done on your own, it is a lot easier to slack off when you don't have as many when the deadlines are kind of more at the end of the week, or at the end of the month, or whatever, because you don't have that meeting multiple times a week. It's just, in my experience, it's way easier to slack off. I mean, you can slack off when you're in a physical location too, but it's just easier from what I've seen, what I've talked to other people, and so. If you're not self-disciplined, I don't mean that in a negative way. Just some of us are more, we kind of need deadlines, and some of us will just get it done. So if you're not someone that will get it done on your own, if you're always someone like waiting till the last minute, online seminary might not be your option, because you'll get in a lot of trouble, because then everything will be due at once. At least typically when you go somewhere, it's kind of more spread out. So that's one con. You must be self-disciplined. Another con, if I'm just being honest, I don't think you learn quite as much. Now, I would say this. You can still learn. You can learn more online than you can in a physical location, but that's only if you're willing to put in all the work and if you're being disciplined. I do think, and for some of the next two reasons I'll give in a second, I do think though overall you won't learn quite as much. It's not that I don't think that I wouldn't say online seminary is less than or shouldn't count as a degree, because then it goes back to like, are you there to get a degree? Are you there to learn? Like for me, the degree was fine, but I was more there to learn. So I did all my homework. I did all my readings that I didn't have to do. I watched all the lectures that I wouldn't technically have to. Or if you go to a physical location, you could have slept. You're not listening. So I did all that, but I do think I could have learned a little bit more. Now, in my case, I still think I learned way more being at the church and out planting it than being at a physical location and not having that experience. So overall, I learned way more. But just the intellectual side, I don't think I learned quite as much as if I was somewhere physically. So
why do you think, this school or this seminary offers an MDiv online and in person, same school? Why do you think one would be, or why do you think online is not quite as, I don't mean to say good, but why do you think you don't learn as much in the same program online?
So let me give you the next two cons, and I think that's will answer your question. Here's another con.
Dying to know.
You don't have any relational connections. So part of it is, in terms of, and maybe even after graduating, is that when you're online, you don't, I didn't know any of my professors. I didn't meet really any of my classmates. And so kind of those lifelong friendships, if you're looking for a job, if you have in a rep spot in ministry and want someone to talk to, seminary is a great place to learn some of those things, especially from your professors. I didn't get that. And so I think it's a little bit harder to learn when you don't have have wise friendships and relationships being built when certain things happen. And so that's a con, is that you have no relational connections. And then another con, the fourth con, that really gets to that, is that it's a lot harder to get questions answered online. I had tons of questions. A lot of them went unanswered because email, you can only be so nuanced. You can't go back and forth. And so since you don't have that in-person to talk to, there's no office hours really. A lot of your questions, even if they're not necessarily about the content, just like something piqued your interest and you want to learn more, you can Google it and read about it, but it's helpful to talk with someone that is an expert in that and can actually go back and forth with. And so I think the biggest reason why you don't learn as much is it's easy to be distracted if you're not so super self-disciplined, but also you can't ask that back and forth questions that are really, really helpful. Now you can make up for that in mentorship and all these sorts of things, but it's a little bit different, and so that's a con for that. So those are some pros, and those are some cons for online education.
Well, I think the biggest con I've always seen, because if you didn't figure this out from by the beginning of the episode by me not giving a disclaimer, I didn't go to seminary. And so, but one of the things I always read about online seminary is the biggest issue, or at least that's what I see come across, is that you're not building any relationships there. That's one of the most valuable things in seminary, is the friendships and relationships you'll build with professors and with other students, and that you don't have that there. So as someone who did, we talked about it, but do you think that con outweighs the pros, I guess you could say?
So here, I think every situation is very unique. I think if you're younger and graduating, single, maybe married, but no kids, like just got out of college, and you don't have a place to go, like you're not part of a church plant or a part of a local church, and you're just kind of a free agent, if you will. I would recommend physically going somewhere.
Yeah.
Because of those relationships, you can learn a little bit more. Especially if you're not a self-starter type of person. So I would recommend, if you are part of a community, if you know where you want to be, if you're part of a church community, church plant, whatever, then I would recommend online, because there is no substitute for practical experience.
Right.
Now, if you're fortunate enough, you can move somewhere. This is the goal. Like one of the guys on staff here, Adam, he moved to the seminary in the Raleigh area, and he found us, so he gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
in my
totally.
opinion. But for me, we were planting a church in a town that didn't have seminary, and I had a relationship. I was going to have opportunities, and so for me, the ability to have the opportunity made it so that I should not have gone somewhere.
Yeah.
If that opportunity had not arisen, we would have, like I said, moved across the country and gone.
Yeah, so it's not so much of do online seminary, or not so much saying that it's okay to sacrifice those relationships, but make sure you're getting them elsewhere, or make sure you're still getting them.
Yeah.
So if we could, rewind the clock and go back to Dylan Dodson graduated with his undergrad, go back, 20, 30 years ago, however long it was.
20, 30 years.
Would you do online
I was
again?
graduating diapers that time ago. So for me, I would do what I did again.
Yeah.
I would have. Now, when I started out, hardly any schools were doing fully online. Now, pretty much everybody is.
Yeah.
So I wish I could have had more options in that regard. But you can't change that. But I would have done what I did again. Now that I would have done things different in terms of just life and whatever. But the options at the time, I would have done online, because it allowed me to stay in a situation where I knew I was going to get an opportunity. Yeah. I think opportunity and experience is the most important thing. I think theological education is very important, but opportunity and experience is more important. I think you should marry the two in somehow.
Yeah.
So like I said, if you're young, if you don't have any place to be, I would look into going somewhere. Now, don't get stuck in the seminary bubble. Like, in other words, be a part of a church. Don't be lazy. Don't let that the only thing. Serve somewhere. But if you're somewhere and you're serving and you're thinking about education, online education is good. It is not less than. It is not like, oh, you were online, it's not as good. At the end of the day, online or in person, you will get in what you put. You'll get what you put in.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't really care to learn and you want to scoot by, you could probably do that a little bit easier online. If you actually want to learn and are willing to do the work, you will learn a lot in both. And again, if you're somewhere where you're getting practical experience, I personally would stay there and do online, as opposed to having to leave that for a few years and then try to go back.
Yeah, makes sense.
So those are some pros and cons of seminary online. Hopefully that helped you if you were in that situation. If you have any questions further about this or anything that has to do with ministry and church planting, as always, practicalplanting.com/questions. You ask, we'll talk about it in a future episode. And until next time, we'll be with you on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.